Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to compare the iPhone 15 to the Samsung Galaxy S24. Two very similar phones. They have about the same price, they have about the same speed, you'll see it later, they have the same physical size, they have when it comes to sensor size and optical quality, they have the same quality cameras, despite the fact that the S24 has one more sensor. So they are two phones that are very hard to compare because there's obviously going to be people that are going to choose the S24 based on specs and the iPhone based on specs, but most people, since they are so similar, are going to choose based on operative system preferences. So actually that's the one thing that I'm going to focus more on in this video, the operative system, because since they are so similar, I think that's the deciding factor between the two, or that is what's going to be for most people at least. As always, you have Amazon links for both phones down below in the description, with an amazing price by the way, so if at the end of the video you're interested, I recommend you go take a look. As always, let's begin by talking about the exterior design, which, as you can see, is not identical, but it is very similar. They both have matte glass on the back. They both have flat aluminum sides, which, by the way, are almost identical. The only difference is that the S24 has a slightly shinier finish as opposed to the iPhone, but they are both, aluminum. They both have about the same strength. Then on the front, they both have the same physical size with the same 6.1-inch display, although I think the S24 has a almost 6.2-inch display, but that's like nothing. You can see here it's not a noticeable difference. And well, the only technical difference, the only technical advantage on the S24 is that it has very slightly thinner bezels, I think 4.3 millimeters, nothing remarkable, and that it has a hole punch instead of the dynamic island, which is a little bit more noticeable. It's like probably 5 times the size as opposed to a hole punch on the iPhone. But yeah, besides that, they are both almost identical. The only real advantage I would give the iPhone 15 is that it has the old mute switch. It's kind of outdated now that Apple has moved on to the action button on the 15 Pros, but it's basically the same thing. It's a quick toggle, so you don't have to turn on the phone and browse through the settings to perform a certain thing. In this case, it is locked to only be able to mute the phone, but it is very useful. I remember back in the day when I went to high school, I used to, whenever I got to class, I used to put the phone on silent mode. I didn't even have to take it out of my pocket. I just flipped the switch, silent mode, it vibrated to tell me if it had, put the phone in silent mode, so I didn't have to worry about it. And that's something you can only do with, I think, iPhones and OnePlus phones. Every other phone only has the typical volume rocker and on and off switch. Then when it comes to the internal components, as I said earlier, they are also very similar. The iPhone has an Apple processor, the A16 in this case, and the Samsung has, depending on your region, either a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or a Exynos processor, but both are incredibly fast, top tier, top of the line processors. And of course, performance on both phones is going to be very good and very similar. I'm preparing a speed test comparison between the two, where you'll see how all of these apps load up 2 times, and then how the multitasking manages all of them open at the same time, and then we'll do a Geekbench test. But in this video, I'm going to give you a quick little test run to see more or less the speed differences between the two in these 4 apps. But what I can tell you for sure is that the S24 here is being a little bit faster in the set of apps that we're opening up. I'm sorry, this was not supposed to happen. The iPhone was supposed to open the selfie camera. Let's do that again. Oh my god, come on, don't be clumsy, George. There we go. Oh, that was a little faster on the iPhone. Bottom line, they are both very similar. You'll see it in the speed test comparison. And the only little small differences come down to how well optimized the app is on Android as opposed to iOS, or vice versa. So yeah, either way, I would not buy one or the other based on like how fast they are, because they are both very, very fast. And same goes for the RAM, by the way. This is a very controversial topic. The iPhone has 6 gigabytes of RAM and the S24 has 8. Some people say this doesn't matter because Apple is better at optimizing the OS. Some other people say Samsung is better because since it has more RAM, it will technically do better. In my opinion, in my experience, by the way, using both phones, and you'll see it once again in the speed test comparison, they are both about as good as each other when it comes to handling a lot of apps at the same time. So I would say that the fact that the iPhone has 2 gigabytes less than the S24 is not a big deal. It doesn't really matter in practical terms. Now, what really matters in this comparison, as I said earlier, is the OS, the operative system on each phone. In this case, we have iOS 17.5.1 on the iPhone. We have One UI 6.1 and Android 14 on the S24, which are, by the way, the latest available versions at the time I'm making this video, but I know iOS 18 is on the way, Android 15 is on the way. Both those include some nice updates, but right now this is what we have. And let me tell you, there's something I want to say off the rip, because there's a lot of misconceptions with Samsung phones. A lot of people seem to believe, me included back in the day, that Samsung phones are not as optimized or not as fluid as iPhones. And this is not true. This is not true at all. The S24, I've tried a bunch of Samsung phones lately, the S24, the S22, the S21, the S20, a bunch. And all of them worked amazing. Of course, the S24 is faster than the S20 because it's newer and it's more powerful, but they all felt incredibly smooth when opening apps and when browsing the system, which is what, usually gets affected by optimization. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't really care about the Apple ecosystem, but are buying iPhones because they think they run so much better, so much faster. That is simply not true. You're going to have an amazing experience with almost every high-end Android phone, especially Samsung phones. Samsung has been doing an amazing job with One UI. Let me see if I can. Oh, there's no Easter egg. There is an Easter egg for Android, but not for One UI. Both are going to give you an amazing experience with optimization. Of course, the iPhone is this is one of the strengths of Apple, the way they optimize their OS for their hardware, so everything runs amazing. So yeah, either way, whichever phone you buy, software optimization is going to be crazy good. Now, the main difference here, I would say, is that the iPhone comes with a very, very complete ccosystem. The Apple ecosystem. You can connect this to AirPods. You can connect this to an iPad, a Mac. There's so many things you can do thanks to the ecosystem, like receiving calls on your watch or on your computer or on your tablet. You can access a ton of apps like the Notes app, which is amazing, by the way. I believe this is the best note-taking app in the world, and I'm not joking. It's incredible. You can access the Apple Photos. You can access basically all of their apps in their ecosystem. And of course, this is not for everybody. There's people who don't like the Apple ecosystem, but if you do, and there's a lot of people who do, the iPhone is going to be better because it has access to that Apple ecosystem. On the other hand, by the way, Samsung also gives you access to an ecosystem, something a lot of people don't talk about. We can connect the S24 to Samsung Buds or to a Samsung Watch or to a Samsung TV. So there is an ecosystem we can access if we buy an S24, and it gives you a lot more customization. And this is probably its biggest strength. Not necessarily because it's a Samsung phone, but more so because it is an Android phone. You have access to a lot of customization options. You can use, of course, you can use, as I do, One UI as your launcher, but you can use any other launcher you want. You can use Xiaomi's launcher if you want on a Samsung phone. Like, there is no limits to what you can do on an Android phone. So if you're a techie or a geek like me, you want to, tinker and play around with a phone, this is a dream device because it is very powerful, it is very smooth, it looks great, but it gives you all the options and all the capabilities you could desire, not even from Android, because Apple doesn't let you download apps from other websites or other stores, but you can do that on the S24. So it's not even what Android offers. It's what anybody can offer you, period. Technically, you can do this legally. Install an emulator on this phone to run Windows on it. So like that, what I'm trying to say is that there's no limit to the things you can do on this phone, but there is a very clear limit on things you can do with this phone. Now, I quickly want to touch on battery life. There's not a lot to say because they both have about the same battery life. But there's one personal experience that I want to share, and it's that when I did the technical test, battery life test with these two phones back in like February when the S24 came out, I got a very similar result. Like they both gave me like 7 hours and 30 minutes, around as much. Maybe the iPhone gave me like a couple minutes more than the S24, but about the same. Now, lately, I've been doing a lot of tests with these phones. I've been using them a lot, very intensively, and I have noticed that the S24 is a little bit more demanding as opposed to the iPhone. It drains the battery a little faster as opposed to the iPhone. It's not a one-time thing. It's happened many, many times. I've noticed how this phone, even when I leave the phone on idle, like when I'm not using the phone, the iPhone is able to retain the battery for a lot longer as opposed to the S24. It is not a huge difference. It is maybe a 10% difference at most, but it is there, and I just wanted to share that. Another relatively big difference between the two is, as you can see, the displays. I said earlier, there's some differences in the display. They're very minute in my opinion. They're not deal breakers, but as you can see, there's a bigger pill on the iPhone 15. We have slightly thicker frames too, and we have 60 hertz. We have a 60 hertz refresh rate as opposed to the 120 hertz on the S24. And this is a very controversial topic. A lot of people say that they can't notice the difference. It doesn't really matter. So you should not spend more money on a phone because it has 120 FPS. But in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, you can tell the difference. I mean, I've been using 60 hertz phones for a long time. I've definitely gotten used to how they feel. But it only takes a couple hours of using a slightly more fluid or heavily more fluid phone with 120 hertz to not be able to go back without it, like a 2-3 day period of suffering, of adapting to a choppy phone. Because this, if you come from a 120 hertz phone, it's going to feel choppy. It's going to feel like it's lagging, like it's struggling to move around the system. It's hard to explain. I think you have to get used to the better experience to then appreciate how big the difference actually is. And finally, let's move on to one of the probably most interesting points to compare on these two phones, the cameras. As you can see, we have a very big difference off the rip, which is that the iPhone only has 2 sensors and the S24 has 3. They are very similar though. They both have a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. They both have a 48/50 megapixel main sensor, almost the same resolution. But the S24 has another sensor. In this case, it is a 3x. It's a 3x telephoto zoom with 10 megapixels that comes in very, very handy. Not necessarily because it has a better quality than the other 2 sensors, but it gives you more range of motion, so you don't have to move as close to objects and still take a very good photo, and gives you a different look on your photos. As a little real life comparison, I have taken 3 photos of this clip that you can see here in the desk. An ultra wide photo, a main camera photo, and a zoom photo. In the iPhone, I've used the artificial 2x zoom that the phone offers, but it's not a real third camera. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the photo that I've just taken of this clip. You know what? I'm going to take it again because I'm pretty sure that if I just show you the photo, you're going to tell me that I've benefited one phone over the other by editing the photo or something like that. You know, people always like to, say things like that. So I'm just going to take the photos in real time so you don't accuse me of anything. You're going to see the real photos taken in real time. As you can see, I've just taken the 2 photos. And there are some very noticeable apparent differences between the two. The first one is the colors. As you can see, the iPhone has, for some odd reason, and this happens on the iPhone 15 Pro 2, disclaimer for people interested in buying that phone, very warm and greenish tones on their photos. For some reason, this didn't happen on the iPhone 14 Pro that I have here too, so I can say it from experience. They kind of fucked up the color science on their iPhone 15 lineup for some reason. As you can see, the S24 has a lot more natural colors that look more like what I'm seeing here in real life. But let's zoom in and take a look. Wow. Let's take a look at the detail. As you can see, the iPhone has a lot more detail than the S24. It feels like the S24 is not applying any blur reduction, noise reduction, sharpening on post, because it looks dramatically softer than the iPhone. I'm not sure if it's because the iPhone is actually sharper. It has a sharper lens or a sharper sensor. I don't think so. I think it comes down to the Samsung phone not applying the right settings or the right exposure or the right post-production adjustments. But yeah, there's a noticeable difference. I was not expecting it to be so noticeable. Let's look at the edges of the photo once. Oh, there we go. Ultra wide photo. Noticeable difference on the edges too. The iPhone kept it very, very, in focus, very sharp, and Samsung did a questionable job with this ultra-wide picture. As you can see, once again, color difference, very apparent color difference between the two. The iPhone, once again, is a little warmer and less real-life looking for some reason. It is very strange. Apple used to take very natural-looking photos, and this is weird. This is incredibly weird, and especially the fact that they haven't fixed it after like 8 months of the iPhone 15 being in the market. Very actually concerning, in my opinion. But anyways, let's zoom in and look at the detail. Oh my God, once again, maybe not as apparent as it was with the ultra-wide camera, but the iPhone is sharper. As you can see, the edges are more defined. There's a little bit more detail, and you can really notice when you look at the texture of the desk. It is noticeable on the iPhone photo. It is not on the photo I took with the S24. I can see the texture of the desk here, and I can't on the S24. Finally, God damn it, Jesus Christ, how can it be so complicated? Let's look at the zoom photo. In this case, the iPhone didn't take a 3x telephoto with its own 3x camera. This is a crop on the main sensor to take a slightly more zoomed in photo. But either way, it is a photo to compare, so let's compare it. My God, once again. In this case is even less noticeable. It's a little bit more subtle, but once again, the iPhone is a little bit sharper than the S24. You can see it once again on the texture of the desk. It's more noticeable on the iPhone. This is very surprising to me. I mean, I was not expecting for there to be a noticeable difference at all between these two phones because they have very similar specs. They have very similar sensor sizes and resolutions and and optical quality. So I was like, there's not going to be a big difference. Maybe if I zoom in a lot, there's going to be very, very subtle differences in sharpness, but it was noticeable. It was definitely noticeable that the S24 was a little blurrier. As I said at the beginning of the video, they are both very similar phones. The S24 may have a slightly better display, may have more customization options. The iPhone has this little switch right here. Maybe it has slightly sharper photos as we've seen, but they are very, very similar. And I would not recommend one over the other. I think, as I said at the beginning, the biggest differentiating factor between the two comes down to the OS. And that's something where I can't give you a definitive answer because I'm going to get fried in the comments, number one. And number two, because it is very subjective. Maybe you like the Apple ecosystem, so you love an iPhone. Maybe you don't like the Apple ecosystem. Maybe you have a ton of Samsung gadgets and you would love to be a part of or expand your Samsung ecosystem. Maybe you love customization. Maybe you don't like it, so you don't care. It is not a thing on the iPhone. Really depends on your personal preference. It is based on personal preference. They have about the same price, so yeah. Either way, they both have amazing prices on Amazon. You have a link down below in the description, and now that the video is about to end, and the price is so juicy, I recommend you go take a look.